Good morning, Gary David Allard.
Hey, good morning to you. Good morning to you, Chris. Hello,
Uh,
good morning. Good morning to everybody.
yes,
And
and
first, also, let me thank you for doing this. You're so amazing. Yeah. And
oh,
thank you to People Voice for putting this together. Man, you know I love you guys, and you guys are always, always number one in my heart.
I'm thankful to you for agreeing to do this interview. This is a new thing for us this
Right.
year, where we're trying to interview artists so we can add to what's posted on the website and also possibly throughout social media, so people can get to know our performers a little bit better and make more educated decisions about whether they want to come to the show. And I
Understood.
think the more people learn about how great all of our artists are, the more people will show up. So that's our goal here. Okay.
Wonderful,
Uh,
wonderful.
so let's start. Let's start at the beginning. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where were you born? Where were you raised? Where'd you go to school? How did you get involved with music?
Oh, wonderful. Easy questions. Okay. I was born here in the United States. I was born and raised here in Brooklyn. Um, I went to school here in Brooklyn, Nazareth High School, my high school, and grammar school. I went to St. Vincent Ferrer, so I'm a Catholic schoolboy all through. I went to St. Vincent Ferrer all my life, and yeah, actually, I still play guitar at St. Vincent Ferrer. And that's it. I come from a Trinidadian family, and they were newly immigrants, and and that's about it. That's some basic about me.
What part of Brooklyn were you living?
Well, I lived here in Flatlands, Brooklyn, most of my life. Some parts, sometimes I lived in Flatlands, Flatbush, Brooklyn, with in my grandmother's house. So, like my grandmother and my aunt had like a two-family house, and all the family members emigrated into that house. And then when I moved to Flatlands and my mother's house, uh, some of the cousins lived there also, which I'll probably go into later.
I know the Flatbush, East Flatbush area pretty well from my political experience. So I know that it is definitely heavily populated with folks who've all, as Billy Joel said, come from somewhere, which is very cool. Although he was talking about Los Angeles when he
Mhm.
wrote that line. So when did and how did you get involved with music?
Oh, that's a great question. I think music had always been in me. And I always like, to be honest with you, as a kid growing up here in Brooklyn and having my whole family here in that one household, they were always playing music. And so I think listening to what they were listening, of course, I was listening to pop music and they were listening to calypso music most of the time, just got into me, And how I got into music is, I don't know, listening to what they were listening to and listening to what I was listening and the community listened to. I just fell in love with the genre of music in general. Now, at those times, I was just listening. I couldn't play, I couldn't sing. And I could go into the story of how, it's a long story of how I emigrated and became a musician.
Go ahead.
Oh, wonderful. So my music experience, I guess by listening to what my parents listened, mostly calypso music, I was obsessed with it after a while. In high school, of course, I was listening to pop music, rap and pop music. And then little by little, that music started getting into me. And then one day my cousin just won an album from one of the local radio station, a calypso album. And I used to sneak it and listen to it and listening to my father's collections. And all of a sudden, then I was hearing all these wonderful artists, like all these like politically artists like David Rudder, Mighty Shadow singing like Columbus Live. And that's how I started getting into, all this more to the political type music. But I could go into that later if need be.
No, no. I will freely admit I am not as knowledgeable of all the quote unquote political components of the music, but I have been schooled to understand that every song that I hear on Eastern Parkway on Labor Day has three meanings, at least two of which are political. And of
Right.
course, I grew up listening to on the street, the Mighty Sparrow was the big one because he was here
Right.
and he was quite active, and he's very, very direct in many of his lyrics. So that's
Yeah, definitely.
that's pretty
Well,
heavy duty stuff, But
it is.
so I can understand how you can get sucked in.
You get sucked in, and you learned a lot. Like I was listening to David Rudder, and I learned about Haiti and the issues that Haiti went through throughout the years. I was listening to the Mighty Shadow, and the first time I heard that Columbus lied, or listening to Brother Valentino, and he's talking about Zimbabwe and the revolution in Zimbabwe. Singing Sandra talking about sexual harassment. I could go on and on. Baron talking about how the River of Tears, and like the Black Stallions thinking about colonialism in Africa. And so when people ask me, well, how did you get into political music? It's like I couldn't help it. It was there, in my brain from listening to that music. And so whatever I do artistically, I can't help but take a lot of what I learned from listening to that music.
Right. So
now, I can't be a calypsonian, but at least I could learn some lessons.
Right. So let me ask you this from a musical style and content perspective.
Mm-hmm.
What do you perceive as being a distinction between, Bob Marley style reggae and the calypso music that you were raised on? Is there a distinction?
Aside from the musical, you got reggae is reggae and calypso is calypso. But I more looked at the similarities, the consciousness of what both of them had. Think an aspect keeping political leaders accountable, how they taught history in their music, how they talk about current events and what's going on around the world. And I think one of the singers has said that like calypso music is really like the poor man's newspaper. And when I do my music, I keep those lessons in mind. I wanted to talk about politics. I want to talk about keeping people accountable. I want to sprinkle some history in there. Especially what's going on with the media today. We need a poor man's newspaper, or a working man's newspaper, I should say.
And then you sort of started getting into American civil rights folk music.
Yeah, actually. Eventually, so let me tell you. Eventually, it's a long story. I was into, let's start like I was into calypso at that time. And eventually I had thinking if I wanted to get into music, and I had met a calypso artist by the name of Devin George. I was in a Sandmass one day and I'm thinking, oh man, should I go into this? And again, I had no musical training. I could not sing. I could not play an instrument. But I met
wait, I have to correct you. You could always sing, you just didn't know it.
Okay, I guess so.
Because if you couldn't sing then, you can't sing now, and you can sing now. So you could sing, you just didn't know it.
I didn't know it. You're so right. I didn't know it. Right, and I didn't have the confidence at all. And I never did it before. Really did it before. But this gentleman, he took me around, and he took me around. I met him, and we became friends. And he took me around shows. He took me in the studio. I get to see all my calypso heroes and watch them work. It was like an amazing experience. He gave me some ideas of songwriting, and from taking that year or two, like being friends with him, I said, okay, let me try this music thing. So I went into I started forming a group of some friends, and those it was a fun experience a little bit. And then eventually I got kicked out because, again, I didn't know what I was doing. All of us gone through musicals ups and downs. So I had given up on music. And then so I said, let me go back and work on my media studies degree that I was working on. Maybe I could be a journalist or something. And I went back to Mass in Catholic Church. And of course, you meet a girl. And of course, she gets you into the choir. And that's where my musical journey started. So I went back to church, and in my mind, I didn't want anything to do with singing, but I started attending Mass at that church, and joining that choir, I started to develop as a singer. and you learn so much things and harmony and singing. You're learning spirituals, you're learning gospel, and then I started joining different folk, what should I say, contemporary Catholic groups, and then I learned about singing background for people. It was this cute little Filipino family that I was singing with for a little while, and they encouraged me to teach myself how to play the guitar, which they were self-taught musicians, and I developed in there. It's funny. I went this St. Vincent Ferrer at the time was a very liberal church, and I had a very liberal priest, and he had given us free reign. Especially at the time when I joined, it was a gospel choir, and then it started to falter a little bit. And he had given us free reign to do whatever you want and do whatever you needed and make all the mistakes you need to make. And so you sit there every Sunday in front of people making mistakes and most of the time doing a great job. And there's where my musical skills started to develop.
So basically, he emphasized the fact that music is the joyful noise, and you don't have to worry about being perfect, because as long as you're singing with your heart, you're doing the right thing. So this, if I may explore this a little bit, so the Catholic Church has been a huge, or Catholicism has been a huge force in your life.
Okay.
Are you still a practicing Catholic at this time?
Still a practicing Catholic this time. A struggling Catholic, especially with the politics that's going on, and you have to listen to, But I'm still practicing my faith. I consider myself more of a liberal, progressive Catholic than what's going on today. And I could go into stories, who, what, why, but to explore it a little bit too, yeah, I consider myself more of a progressive Catholic, and I try to stay in that vein and standpoint.
That's interesting because I mean, I'm no scholar in this area, but I've always been struck by the fact that Catholicism seems to have two fascinating extremes. There's one extreme which is extremely conservative, and then there is this essentially, liberation theology, was rooted in Catholics who basically said, hey, we're interpreting the way this should be done a little bit differently. So the movements that came out of South America and elsewhere, that's powerful stuff. So, in no way is being spiritual or religious something to shrink away from. It's just everyone's got to find their own path, and it sounds like you found yours.
Yeah, exactly. And I find myself, as I got, my experiences of being in the younger church and having a liberal priest, and then transitioning to a more conservative, and you're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And then you find yourself as getting older, and you're going back to more of that liberal experience that you had, or liberation theology you're digging into. And I feel more comfortable there. And I was like, thank God for that young experience that I had, Because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be going to church at all,
Right. Okay. So I understand. I get it. So tell me more about when you started getting into more of well, let's put it this way. I am not assuming that you are just a American folk singer. I'm not assuming that. But what I am curious to know, because we don't know each other well, and I've only heard you perform a few times, and they tended to be either spirituals or American folk songs. So tell me more about how you got introduced to that and how you did more of that. And then let's talk a little bit about, today, what do you perform today? Because I know you're also going to be performing with some friends, and I'm curious to know where that's going to go. So let's start with the American folk music. How did all of that fold into it? How did you develop your guitar playing, and your comfort level with it? Because I am one who's not comfortable playing and singing at the same time. So.
Well, to be honest with you, it's like an accumulation of everything in all my life experience. So as I told you before, in the beginning, I was obsessed with calypso music, right? And then I moved into the religious aspect of learning religious songs and singing every week. And then after that, I went to the couple of Brooklyn's music schools, like the Brooklyn Conservative of Music, Jalopy School of Music after that, and a lot of adult education. And through there, I was, that's where a lot of my more of my education came from. And I was meeting more and more artists, and I was performing places more. And truthfully, I was learning about spirituals and stuff like that through that community, going to workshops, songwriting camps, and stuff like that. And it just came together. I said, I'm going to take all my life experience and bring it to myself as an artist. So sometimes you'll see me doing spirituals, Calypso, I can't do Calypso, but I can only do songs that do it my way, or a song my way, or use the elements, what I told you before, within the songs that I write. Hopefully some of them is political, some talk about history, some talk about what's going on today.
So wait, let me just interject there for a second. So when you say you can't do Calypso, all right, number one, you can reinterpret a song so that it is more compatible with your delivery, yes. And you also always have the option of getting the audience to handle the rhythm part, right? If you get us all to clap our hands and stomp our feet, then all you have to do is sing on top of that, right?
Of course, but I can't sound like authentic Trinidad.
Oh yeah, of course not. You don't have horns the horns coming out of your head, or the big huge bass, right? We get that.
Yeah, so I'll be like an American guy, American Gary Allard, doing a Calypso song.
Appropriating Calypso.
Exactly.
I love it. So all right, so keep going. So you've gotten all this knowledge, you've been inspired, you started really immersing yourself in the musical community. And I don't know what your day job, what sort of work you do during the day, but you're making time to fit this music into your life, and then you start actually writing songs yourself. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Oh, I started writing songs myself. Yes, yeah, actually, right. Well, so I remember years ago when I was a kid, after I met the Calypso singer Devin George, and he had told me little things about it, and I started writing, and I wrote a little something, and it was so horrible at the time. I think the lyrics was, those 5-0s be bugging on a brother's head. I think they be thumping. And I think I was sharing it with a friend of mine, and I kind of laughed at me. And the funniest thing, and of course I was laughing with him, but the funniest thing is, like, 20 years later, we're talking over the phone. And of course, he didn't know I was like a singer-songwriter or whatsoever. And he remembered my lyrics word for word, and laughing at that. And I was like, he's like, we're laughing about it, but I'm shocked that he remembered it 20 years later. And at that time, I'm writing it all the time. And I was like, oh, wow, at least it was memorable,
Exactly. And you made an impact. You made an impact on him.
Yeah. I was like shocked, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna continue this. But anyway, that was a fun little side note story. But I think my first song, I was in the bedroom, I said, I'm gonna just try this, and I wrote my first song. I put it away, and then one day I had the opportunity somebody asked me to do a song, and I had the opportunity to do it, and I did it, and I had such a good response from it. And then I just continued to the songwrite, and that's basically how I started. And then, of course, I did some open mics, and somebody advised me to do the open mics and, experiment with your songs, and that's how I get to tailor it. And the rest is pretty much history, So I do work full time, and on my side, for my enjoyment, I just, I just write songs. Maybe you want to edit that part out.
No, that's all right. I mean, look, we all have lives,
Yes.
we all, I'm always surprised at how many current or former teachers I meet in this community, although I shouldn't be surprised, right? Because they want to teach about how they feel and about history and about social issues the same way you do.
Yes.
But we all have lives, and that's part of, that's part of it. And I think the singer-songwriter Charlie King wrote this song, our life is more than our work, and our work is more than our jobs.
Right.
I mean, that's just, if you're a cultural worker, that's exactly what it is, right? Our life is more than our work, and our work is more than our jobs. And, I only heard that song once.
Mm.
I mean, I've heard it since, but the first time I heard it, that phrase just stuck with me. So the same way the 5050 phrase stuck in your friend's head, you hear certain lyrics and you will never forget them because they resonate with you in such
Yes.
a unique way.
Right.
And also dusting off those songs, Billy Joel, released an entire album called, I think it was called Songs from the Attic, which were all these songs that he had either recorded or not recorded years earlier in one genre. In fact, he had an album where the quality of the recording was not particularly great.
Right.
But he took all the songs, he brought them back, put them on this album, Songs from the Attic, and they were all popular. They all became popular songs. So you never know when you can go back and actually look at a song that you started, bring it forward, polish it up. Sometimes you don't even have to polish it up because it just means something different, and you're going to sing it different today than you did
Yeah.
yesterday.
You're so right. You're so right. I think in my show coming up, I picked up one of that same first song I started, and I was rewriting it in a different way, especially when I have some wonderful singers with me. And David, wherever he's making a phone call, I believe, and Natalie and Fabiola. And I was thinking about all these wonderful arrangements and harmonies that we could do with this old song that I
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be come off like a remake of it.
But see, the point is, since the rest of us never heard the original song,
Oh, it's true.
Which you have to remember,
I played it maybe
the rest of us,
twice.
we didn't hear the original song. So we're going to hear what you present to us at People's Voice Cafe in the way you choose to present it. And that's how it's going to be memorable for us, which is
that is true. I never thought about that.
Yeah,
though.
don't
Most of
be
y'all
afraid.
haven't really heard that song.
Yeah, once you have a million selling album, then you have to worry about whether this version or that version, But we got to get there first.
Yeah. And again, and I brought up like Natalie and David and Fabio. I'm so blessed to have them working with me and taking their time and
So tell me more about them. Who are they? How did you meet them? What do they do in your act?
Well, most of us, me, Fabiola, Natalie, we grew up in the same neighborhood, and we sat in the same St. Vincent Ferry together, and we play with each other musically every Sunday.
Right.
So we're used to each other. We're used to each other's voices, and we're just like a nice little quartet. And so let's just say it. And again, we've been basically singing with each other since we was kids.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So
David was last maybe 10 or 15 years.
So you're playing guitar. Are they just doing vocals, or are they doing other?
David's gonna be playing guitar and maybe doing a song that maybe he wrote. I'm trying to convince him.
Okay. All right, David. We heard that. We heard that. We want to hear your song.
And actually, he's from Antigua, so I'm trying to get him to do a wonderful calypso song also that night. So that's gonna be fun and hot and groovy. And hot and groovy. It is, and it's a tough song, but I'm trying to I can please with that song because I love it so much. Natalie Fabiola, wonderful vocalist and been, like I said, singing for years in that little parish.
Is anybody playing percussion?
Oh, yes, I do have Wilner. He's from Haiti, and he'll be joining us playing percussion. I still have to remember them. He's going to be joining us playing percussion that night. Also, and I guess how long he's been playing with us for the last maybe 6 years, 7 years.
1 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Wow. So you guys are really a group.
Yeah, it's one of the groups that I'm working with. We're really a quartet, and I guess we do like acoustic, spiritual music, religious music in general. We do some social justice from a social justice standpoint, and I'm moving us again back to our religious conversation, challenging the religious community, and their conservatism, which is a whole nother topic to get
Sure, sure,
into.
sure, sure. Another,
Yeah.
we'll make that our second interview. Um, so, but I want to go back to the musical piece
Mhm.
because, you know, many people who currently attend People's Voice Cafe are either experienced audience members or they're experienced performers in and of themselves. And so they've gone through a lot of this. Others are newer,
Right.
like yourself. And I think one of the questions I want to ask you from the newer standpoint, when I say newer, I mean in terms of, you know, making the rounds of all of these particular places. How do
Sure.
you how do you approach branding? Because you just described to me a quartet,
Mhm.
possibly a quintet, that sings together. Do you have a group name? How do you get your presence out? How do people find out about you? How do they know where you're performing? What do you do to build all that, or is that in the process of being developed now?
Overall, it's in the process of being developed because I do work with the fours in certain aspects. I do solo stuff in certain things, and I sing in a lot of choirs, which we haven't really talked about today. A
Oh,
lot of double
you,
choirs in it,
you
and
can
that's
talk
a
about that more too. We got time. But before you go there, finish answering the other question about
yeah. So I
the
sing in a lot
business
of
side.
quartet, solo work, and choirs. I'm also doing a thing where solo. I want to put together like maybe two or three or um, artists together, which they're doing things like a collective artist collective,
Mhm.
and we're doing things. So all of it's in process, but moving forward.
Have you recorded anything?
Recording, no, I haven't really
No
recorded.
recording yet.
That's going to be one of my future projects to
Right,
start
because
recording.
I know. I mean, you talked about the how amazing it was to be in the studio with those folks when you were younger, and I can totally identify with that because the first time I actually went to a recording studio for real, I was it was after college. Yeah, I guess it was after college, and it blew my mind. I mean, I was like, okay, I can understand why the Beatles stopped touring just to record because you
Yeah,
had so much fun in the studio creating things the way you want to hear them the way you hear them in your head, as opposed to being limited by whatever the environment is around you. It's an unworldly experience. I just love it. But so you have yet to record. So
I
all
like
right.
record, and I'm also thinking about the way I want to record it because I don't want anything overproduced. Sometimes, like the other day, I was just thinking, I just want myself and a guitar and a nice, modern four track. It just, because I love things acoustically.
Right.
But so what I'm working on the process of figuring out how I want to record. I
Well,
don't want
that
anything
that that's good. And part of the process is getting the money.
So true, so true, so
The biggest
true.
barrier to making a record is having the money to make it.
I know it's so true, so true.
So tell me more about your choirs. You said you're singing in multiple choirs.
Yeah, well, I sang in multiple choirs, different types of choirs. The funniest thing, back to our question earlier, how my musical training came together. Um, the experience, of course, an experience doing church music, experience going to all the community music schools here in Brooklyn. And choirs was another one of those experiences. I sang in jazz choirs, classical choirs, folk choirs, gospel choirs. And you can't help but learn so much things from those. And I still sing in a choir, I in a folk choir. It helps you keep your chops up.
May I ask which one? Which choir?
Well, these days I'm singing with Jalopy chorus, and
Where are they located?
Red Hook, Brooklyn, actually, and
Oh,
Jalopy chorus and School of Music, and been in that choir since they started. I took a couple of years off since COVID, and so I just recently started back. So I'm happy to be back after like 2 years off. But I think they've been around like 15 years. So
cool. I have to connect. I'm not familiar with them, so that's thank you for sharing that information. Very cool. And
yeah.
if I may ask one other question before you continue, I'm a little confused. I was under the impression that you lived in Staten Island, and I apologize.
No, no, it's
Are
totally
you not
Brooklyn.
connected with Staten Island?
Not connected with Staten Island at
So
all.
you're all Brooklyn.
No, Brooklyn.
Oh, okay. So you and me, okay, we're Brooklyn boys. All right.
So
So go back to what you were talking about regarding the choirs.
yeah, so right now, presently, I'm in Jalopy Choir, and we do a lot of Eastern European music, which you learn a lot of interesting harmonies in it. And you can see us with that choir at the Brooklyn, hopefully, I think at the Brooklyn Folk Festival. I think I got an email that,
Oh,
and they're usually
awesome.
there at the Brooklyn Folk Festival, and sometimes at the Manhattan Folk Festival and other things. But it's a great choir to be part of.
So let me ask you this, because this is a question that's come up. It's a changing environment, but do you see sort of a racial imbalance in terms of the distribution of people who participate in folk music? I mean, it seems, one of the I like folk music very much. I was
Sure.
raised on it. I love it, but my mother was white, and that was the music she came to know and love, other than classical.
Yeah.
And there seems to be basically folk music is mostly white folks, and then everything
Right.
else is mixed. So what's your take on that?
What's my take on it? I know a lot of folk music, I guess they talk about being authentic as possible. And for me, I try to be authentically me, and that's what I learned. No matter what in music, you have to be authentically you. And of course, I wouldn't try to do a bluegrass song. I'll sing a bluegrass song just for the fun of it. But I would, I have my own background in folk, what I consider folk music. And like I spoke earlier, all my folk music is calypso music, you know what I mean? And my folk music is spiritual. So I try to stick with this, for me, stick with the spiritual. I write songs authentically that comes from me. And of course, I'm taking little bits from my heritage and my thing, and I try to be authentically me. I think that's most of folk. A lot of the artists I have met, or American artists that I've met, I see a lot of people taking their history. It could be Scandinavian, it could be their Irish heritage, it could be their whatever heritage they are, and they're incorporating that in their music. And I learned that from them. So I take my heritage and I incorporated it into my music. And for some people, they might hear that little heritage stealing within my music. So that's how I feel and about folk music in general, and that's how I present myself within the wider community. Authentically, Gary.
Well, I must say this, Gary, that as someone who has less experience doing interviews, that was quite an elegant and eloquent answer, and I appreciate that. Give me the names of two or three of your favorite singer-songwriters, people who, when you're like, this is the person who really made me want to do this.
Okay. Number one definitely is Bob Marley. Is number one.
Bob Marley's number one. Okay.
Number two would be Tracy Chapman. Will be the number
Tracy
two.
Chapman. Ooh, okay.
I always listen to Tracy Chapman. Number three, now again, you heard me speak about earlier. I listen to a lot of calypso, right, and all those wonderful artists. But I want to shout out the songwriters for those artists, right? So you might not know you'll hear the artists, but a lot of these songwriters wrote songs for a lot of these artists,
Right.
and I realized it wasn't the artists more; it was more of the writers of the songs. And when the writers of the songs went away, as an adult now, I'm realizing, oh, it's the writers that I was enamored with, And so I'm like a little detective. Okay, what song did he write here? Who did he write for? Song? Oh, this person. It sounds like this guy writing his songs, So I want to shout out to all the songwriters, man.
Very cool. Very cool. I like that. That's so important. And it's funny. I have conversations with people, and they say, "Oh, I love this singer. I love that singer." And I say, "Yeah, absolutely, they're great performers." And I said, "But it all comes down to the song, because a great song can never be sung badly.
Yeah.
A bad song can be sung wonderfully. A great singer can sing a bad song and make it into something it just never was when it started. But a great song can never be sung badly, because the way it's been crafted. So I hear you. Songwriters, yes.
Yes.
So what do you want to share with our viewers that we don't already know, or that you'd like people to think about as we approach this People's Voice Cafe performance on September 30th of 2023?
Yeah, I just want people to think about come out and have a great evening. Everybody who's performing with me, they know automatically today. We spoke about the other day. It's like we're excited to have a fun time, definitely. And then we have my friend here, David, who's going to come over. And
Hi, David.
you want to
David with the lime green shirt. Oh, I love it, man.
Definitely lime green.
I didn't expect to be this bright today.
No, that's okay. That's okay, man. We're a colorful people.
Thank you.
How are you?
He's doing well. He's here. I told him I was doing an interview today to come through, and I guess we have some songs to go over for later for tomorrow. So
He told me he needed some support, but I guess not. He's doing a fantastic job.
I am a
That's what I
nervous.
think. I think you're doing a fantastic job too. But David, is this your first interview?
For music, yes.
Oh, wow. Well, I feel honored. I got two firsts.
Yes.
Yes.
And thank you for making this comfortable for me. I was like,
Oh, good. And look, that's the way it should be. It should be a conversation, you know. And we're all in the same boat, you know, we're all artists. Sometimes we know a little bit less, sometimes we know a little bit more about who we're speaking with. I'm glad that I got to know you better today, you know, Gary, than I did before, because I really own, you know, we've interacted. We had a good time at last May's People's Music Network thing, but we didn't get to talk, and we didn't we didn't get to play together. We were doing the sounds and MC and all that kind of stuff, you know, which is still necessary, but it's not the same sort of exchange. David, if I may ask you a quick question, how did you get started in music, and what are your influences?
Well, like Gary, I mean, I grew up in a musical family. My father was a bassist. My uncles were guitarists. I grew up with a concert in my living room every Thursday night when the band practiced.
Oh, nice.
That's how my family supported itself until I was probably preteen. When my uncles left and my father tried carrying the band by himself, and then he finally gave it up. From there, similar to Gary, I got pulled into church, so I sang on school glee clubs, national choirs, folk choirs, regular choirs, and then I grew up in Antigua, so that's where my formation was. A lot of the music was more folk stuff. I actually started playing the guitar. I taught myself to play the guitar because I didn't want to learn the piano. And I started playing in the church folk choir. So a lot of the music was upbeat and stuff like that. And that's what I held on to. If I had to sing more the spiritual stuff, the more slow stuff, I'd rather sing than play.
Mm-hmm. I get you.
So when I came to New York to go to school, I pretty much gave up music for about 4 years.
Wow.
I still play every now and then, but my studies were more important. And then got married, and my kids actually started while they were in church, and they were doing like formation stuff, like First Communion stuff. And they had a mass for the kids, and the musician who did the mass moved away. So you had a whole mass happening, and the kids were doing it a cappella. So I went and said, look, I play the guitar, haven't done it in a couple of years. Can I help you? And she said, sure, no problem. So I started doing that with these two young ladies, and it was fun. It was you know, impromptu, it was rough. And probably a year or two later, they did away with that mass, and I got folded into the choir with Gary, and that's where I met Gary and Natalie and Fabiola. And in that choir, I didn't have to really play because we had a pianist, and it was more gospel, really, really nice gospel stuff. And then that pianist got sick, and he moved away, and then they looked at Gary and myself and said, well, you two play guitars, we need a musician, and that's what we've been doing.
I think 20 actually.
The Lord has commanded you to play guitars with our choir. That's the way it is. So listen, I have to say, I'm looking forward to not just hearing you and experiencing the performance, but I'm hoping that based on what I've heard and based on what I will hear, that we have the opportunity to work together too, because it sounds like there's some exciting synergies that we can build. One of the great things about being in organizations like the People's Voice Cafe, People's Music Network, and having the opportunity to meet people is the opportunity to meet people and to cross-pollinate, you know, the styles, the approaches, the experiences, and build something even more glorious than where you started. You know, and I think you guys and your other compatriots, you know, have been able to do that. And I wish you luck with that, because I think it's going to go very well. But at the same time, it means that you're always going to be meeting more people. People like me are going to go, ooh, can I be part of that? You know, and I think that's fantastic. And on that note, we need to bring this to a close, because even though I'm having fun, we know that an interview of 45 minutes or longer will have fewer viewers by the end of the interview than it had at the start.
I hope I gave you enough material.
Oh, Gary, you know, man, you're a pro, man. You're fine. You're fine.
And I didn't touch on, like David said, we both come from a musical family, and maybe next time I'll go into my family aspect of.
Okay, yeah. Look, you always be mysterious. Leave something, you know, leave something for the next interview. Right? Leave something for the next song, right? Because if you write songs about the family, then you never know. We'll learn something about family through your work. But it sounds like there's a lot there, which is great. Yes. And I'm really excited to see you guys on the 30th.
No, I'm excited. Yeah. Already excited. I hope we see a lot of you out there. Yeah.
Cool.
Come expect a great, fun time.
You got it.